The first time I saw Julian, he was leaning against the kitchen counter in our new San Diego home, smirking like he owned the place, his green eyes slicing through me like they could read my soul. I was 19, fresh off a red eye from Chicago, and the last thing I expected was a stepbrother who looked like he'd stepped out of a movie. Sharp cheekbones, dark curls, and a vibe that screamed trouble. By the time I realized I was staring, he'd already caught me, and that smirk widened into something dangerous, something that made my heart stutter and my walls go up. My name's Ethan Carter, a junior at UC San Diego, studying marine biology because the ocean feels like the only thing that doesn't judge. I'm not built for drama. 5'10", hazel eyes, perpetually messy brown hair, and a tendency to overthink everything. Julian, on the other hand, is chaos in human form. At 22, he's a part-time bartender, part-time artist, and full-time enigma who seems to thrive on pushing my buttons. Our parents' marriage last summer threw us together under one roof, a sprawling beachside house in La Jolla that's too big for the tension we carry. I told myself I'd keep my distance. He's my stepbrother, after all. But Julian has a way of unraveling plans. It started with small things. He'd leave his sketchbook open on the living room table, pages filled with intricate charcoal drawings of the coastline, or worse, of eyes that looked suspiciously like mine. He'd blast indie rock at 2 a.m., knowing I had an 8 a.m. lecture, then offer me coffee the next morning with a grin that said he wasn't sorry. I'd dodge him, burying myself in textbooks or late-night runs along the beach, but he'd always find me, showing up at my favorite coffee shop, accidentally bumping into me on campus, or worse, joining me on those runs, matching my pace like it was a game. "Ethan, you can't outrun me forever," he said one night, his breath visible in the cool ocean air as we slowed to a walk. His voice was low, teasing, but there was something else there, something that made my chest tighten. I didn't answer, just kept walking, my sneakers sinking into the sand. I wasn't running from him. I was running from the way he made me feel, like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, one step from falling. The truth is, I've known I'm gay since I was 15, but I've never said it out loud. Chicago wasn't exactly a safe place to come out. Not with my dad's old-school attitude and a high school full of jocks who'd rather punch than talk. San Diego was supposed to be my fresh start, a place where I could be myself without fear. But living with Julian complicates everything. He's not just my stepbrother. He's a magnet, pulling me towards something I'm not ready to face. Every time he's near, my carefully built walls start to crack, and I hate how much I want to let them fall. That night, after our run, I found him on the back patio, sketching under the string lights. The ocean roared in the distance, and the air smelled of salt and eucalyptus. He didn't look up as I approached, but his pencil stopped moving. "You're avoiding me again," he said, his voice soft but pointed. I froze, my heart hammering. "I'm not." I lied, but my voice betrayed me, shaky and too quiet. He set the sketchbook down, stood, and closed the distance between us. Too close. His green eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment, I forgot how to breathe. "Why do you do that?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Act like I'm the enemy?" I wanted to tell him it wasn't him I was fighting. It was me, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I turned and walked away, the sound of his sigh chasing me into the house. The next week, I threw myself into school, volunteering for extra lab hours to study coral samples, anything to keep my mind off him. But Julian was relentless. He'd leave notes in my backpack, stupid things like, "Don't forget to eat," "nerd," or a doodle of a shark with my name on it. I told myself it was just him being annoying, but each note felt like a thread tying me to him, tighter and tighter. One afternoon, I was at Torrey Pines State Reserve, collecting data for a project, when I saw him. He was sitting on a rock, sketching the cliffs, his dark curls catching the sunlight. I should have left, but my feet moved toward him, drawn by that invisible pull. "You following me now?" I asked, trying to sound annoyed. He looked up, his smile slow and deliberate. "Maybe you're the one following me, Ethan." His voice was warm, like he was sharing a secret, and my stomach flipped. We sat there for hours, talking about nothing and everything. His art, my obsession with the ocean, the way San Diego felt like a dream we didn't deserve. For the first time, I didn't feel like I had to hide. But when his hand brushed mine, accidental but lingering, I pulled back. The fear was still there, a shadow I couldn't shake. "I should go," I said, standing abruptly. His face fell, but he didn't push. "Whenever you're ready, Ethan," he said, and those words stayed with me long after I left. By the time I got home, my head was a mess. I wanted to hate him for making me feel this way, for making me question everything I'd buried so deep. But I couldn't, because the truth was, the more I tried to avoid Julian, the more I realized I didn't want to. The weeks that followed were a tug-of-war between my head and my heart. I'd see Julian's sketchbook left open on the couch, his latest drawing a detailed sketch of the La Jolla tide pools, and I'd feel a pang I couldn't name. I kept telling myself it was nothing, just a crush, a fleeting thing I could ignore. But every time he walked into a room, my pulse betrayed me, racing like I just sprinted a mile. San Diego was alive with autumn, the air crisp and the beaches less crowded. I started spending more time at the university's marine lab, partly to focus on my research, partly to avoid the house. My project on coral bleaching was demanding, but it was a lifeline, something solid to hold on to when Julian's presence made everything else feel like quicksand. Still, he found ways to slip into my routine. One day, I caught him waiting outside the lab, leaning against his beat-up motorcycle, a coffee cup in hand. "Thought you might need this," he said, holding it out. I took it, our fingers brushing, and I hated how much I noticed. "You don't have to do this," I said, my voice sharper than I meant. His smile faltered, but he shrugged. "Maybe I want to." That was Julian, always pushing, never forcing, leaving me room to retreat but making it clear he wasn't going anywhere. I mumbled a thanks and hurried inside, the coffee burning my hand as much as his gaze burned my back. At home, things were no easier. Our parents, Lisa and Marcus, were blissfully unaware of the tension simmering between us. They'd throw barbecues on the weekends, inviting neighbors and coworkers, and Julian would play the perfect son. Charming, funny, effortless. I'd watch him from across the yard, laughing with someone, his green eyes catching the sunlight, and I'd feel a mix of envy and longing. He was so comfortable in his skin, so unapologetically himself. Meanwhile, I was still hiding, afraid of what it would mean to let anyone, especially him, see the real me. One night, after a particularly loud party, I found him on the roof, a place he'd claimed as his own. He was lying on a blanket, staring at the stars, a beer bottle resting beside him. "Room for one more?" he asked, patting the space next to him. Against my better judgment, I sat down. The city lights twinkled below, and the ocean's rhythm felt like a heartbeat. "You ever feel like you're running out of time?" he asked, his voice quiet. I looked at him, surprised. "Time for what?" He turned to me, his eyes searching mine. "To be who you really are." My throat tightened. I wanted to tell him everything. How I'd spent years pretending, how I was terrified of what people would think, how he made me want to be brave. But instead, I said, "You don't know me, Julian." His jaw clenched, and for a moment, I thought he'd argue. But he just nodded, his voice soft. "Maybe, but I'm trying to." The next day, I saw him with someone else. A guy from his art class, tall and confident, with a laugh that carried across the coffee shop where I was studying. They were sitting close, too close, and something twisted in my chest. Jealousy, sharp and unfamiliar, hit me like a wave. I packed up my books and left, telling myself it didn't matter. Julian could do what he wanted. He wasn't mine. But the thought of him with someone else made it hard to breathe. That night, I confronted him. It was late, the house quiet, and he was in the garage, painting on a massive canvas. "What's your deal, Julian?" I demanded, my voice louder than I meant. He turned, paintbrush in hand, his expression unreadable. "What's yours?" he shot back. "You act like I'm the problem, but you're the one who keeps running." I froze, the truth of his words hitting hard. "I'm not running," I said, but it sounded weak even to me. He stepped closer, his eyes fierce. "Then stop. Just stop." For a moment we stood there, the air between us electric. I could have kissed him. I wanted to, but the fear was stronger, and I turned away, leaving him standing there with paint on his hands and frustration in his eyes. I spent the rest of the night awake, replaying that moment, hating myself for being such a coward. The next morning, I found a note slipped under my door. Just 3 words in Julian's messy handwriting. "You are enough." I stared at it for too long, my heart aching. I wanted to believe it, but I didn't know how. The note stayed in my pocket for days, a quiet reminder I couldn't ignore. I carried it to class, to the beach, to the lab, feeling its weight like a promise or a challenge. Julian didn't bring it up, but he didn't need to. His presence was enough, a constant pull that made it harder to keep pretending I didn't feel something. San Diego's winter was creeping in, the air cooler, the sunsets more vivid. I threw myself into my routine: classes, lab work, long walks along the cliffs, to keep my mind busy. But Julian was everywhere. He'd show up at the house with new sketches, each one more personal, like the one of me sitting by the ocean, my face half hidden but unmistakable. "Stop drawing me," I told him one day, half joking, half pleading. He just grinned. "Can't help it. You're my muse." His words stuck with me, dangerous and warm. I started noticing the little things: how he'd hum while cooking breakfast, how his laugh could light up a room, how he'd look at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. It was torture, wanting something I wasn't sure I could have. My fear wasn't just about coming out. It was about what it would mean for us, for our family, for the fragile balance we'd built. One evening, I went to a campus event, a fundraiser for ocean conservation. I didn't expect Julian to be there, but he was, standing by a booth with his art on display, raising money for the cause. He saw me and waved me over, his smile bright but cautious. "Didn't know you were into this stuff," I said, gesturing at the crowd. He shrugged. "Figured it's your thing, so maybe it's mine too." My heart did that stupid flip again, and I hated how easy it was for him to say things like that. We ended up walking the boardwalk afterward, the lights from the pier reflecting on the water. He told me about his art, how it was the only way he could make sense of the world. I told him about the ocean, how it felt like the one place I could be honest. We stopped by a railing, the waves crashing below, and he turned to me. "Ethan, why do you keep pushing me away?" His voice was raw, vulnerable in a way I hadn't heard before. I wanted to tell him the truth, that I was scared, that I didn't know how to be the person he saw in me. But instead I said, "You're my stepbrother, Julian. It's complicated." His face hardened, but he didn't back down. "It's only complicated if you make it that way." He stepped closer, his hand hovering near mine, and for a moment, I thought he might kiss me. But he didn't. He just sighed and walked away, leaving me standing there, the ocean roaring in my ears. The next day, I saw him with that guy from the coffee shop again. They were at a gallery downtown, Julian's paintings on the walls, and the guy was laughing, touching his arm. I felt sick, not because of them, but because I'd pushed Julian toward someone else. I left before he could see me, my chest tight with regret. That night I couldn't sleep. I went to the roof, hoping to clear my head, and found him there, sketching under the stars. "You're up late," he said, not looking at me. I sat down, the silence heavy. "I saw you today," I blurted out. "At the gallery. With him." Julian's pencil stopped, and he looked at me, his eyes searching. "And," I swallowed, my voice barely audible. "I didn't like it." He set the sketchbook down, his expression unreadable. "Why not, Ethan?" The question hung between us, and for the first time I didn't have an answer that felt like a lie. I didn't say anything, but I didn't move away either. He reached out, his hand brushing mine, and this time I didn't pull back. That moment on the roof changed something. I couldn't pretend anymore, not to myself, not to Julian. His hand in mine felt like a lifeline, and for the first time I let myself hold on. We didn't say much after that, just sat there under the stars, the ocean's rhythm steadying my racing heart. But the fear was still there, a shadow that followed me even as I started to let him in. The next few weeks were a blur of stolen moments. We'd meet at the beach after my classes, walking the shoreline, our shoulders brushing. He'd tell me stories about his childhood in Seattle, how he'd always felt like an outsider until he found art. I'd tell him about Chicago, about the weight of expectations I'd carried for years. With him, I felt lighter, like I could finally breathe. But it wasn't all easy. Our parents started to notice the way we looked at each other, the way we'd linger too long in the same room. Lisa pulled me aside one day, her voice gentle but concerned. "You and Julian seem close," she said, and I could hear the question she wasn't asking. I brushed it off, but it left me rattled. What we had was fragile, and I wasn't sure it could survive the scrutiny of the world or our family. Julian, though, was fearless. He'd hold my hand in public, not caring who saw, his confidence both thrilling and terrifying. One night, we went to a concert in Balboa Park, some indie band he loved. The crowd was thick, the music loud, and he pulled me close, his arm around my waist. "Dance with me," he said, his voice a challenge. I hesitated, but his smile was infectious, and soon we were moving together, lost in the music and each other. For those few hours, I forgot to be afraid. But reality always finds a way back. A week later, I got a call from my advisor about a research opportunity in Hawaii, a 6-month program studying coral reefs. It was a dream, the kind of thing I'd worked for years to achieve. But it meant leaving San Diego, leaving Julian. I told him about it over dinner at a taco stand near the beach, expecting him to be happy for me. Instead, his face fell. "You're leaving?" he asked, his voice tight. "It's not forever," I said, but the words felt hollow. He looked away, his jaw set. "You're running again, Ethan." His words stung, but they weren't wrong. I was scared, not just of leaving, but of what staying would mean, of letting myself love him fully, without holding back. We didn't talk for days after that. I buried myself in preparations for the program, trying to convince myself it was the right choice. But every time I saw Julian, at home, at the coffee shop, on campus, I felt the distance between us growing, and it hurt more than I expected. One night, I found him painting in the garage, his strokes angry and sharp. "You're really going, aren't you?" he asked, not looking at me. I nodded, my throat tight. "I have to." He set the brush down, his eyes meeting mine. "No, you don't. You're choosing to." His voice broke, and for the first time, I saw how much I was hurting him. I wanted to tell him I'd stay, that I'd choose him, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I left, the sound of his paintbrush hitting the floor echoing in my ears. The night before I was set to leave, I found a package on my bed. A small canvas, one of Julian's paintings. It was us, standing on the cliff at Torrey Pines, the ocean stretching out behind us. On the back, in his handwriting, were the words, "Come back to me." I sat there for hours, staring at it, my heart torn in two. Hawaii was everything I dreamed of. Turquoise waters, vibrant reefs, a chance to make a difference. But it felt empty without Julian. I'd see his face in every sunset, hear his voice in the waves. His painting hung in my dorm, a constant reminder of what I'd left behind. I'd try to call, but he'd only answer with texts, short and distant. Couldn't blame him. I'd made my choice. 3 months in, I got an email from him. No subject, just a link to an online gallery. His latest exhibit, titled Tides, was a series of paintings about love and loss, each one more haunting than the last. The final piece was the one from my package. Us on the cliff, our silhouettes against the sea. The caption read, "For Ethan, who taught me what home feels like." I cried for the first time in years, the weight of my decision crashing over me. I flew back to San Diego the next week, cutting my program short. I didn't tell anyone, not even Julian. I just showed up at the house, my heart pounding as I knocked. He opened the door, his eyes wide with shock, then softening into something warmer. "You're back," he said, his voice barely a whisper. I nodded, stepping closer. I couldn't stay away. We stood there, the space between us charged with everything we hadn't said. Then he pulled me into a hug, and I let myself sink into it, the fear melting away. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice muffled against his shoulder. I was scared. I didn't know how to do this. He pulled back, his hands framing my face. "You don't have to do it alone." That night, we walked to the cliff at Torrey Pines, the same one from his painting. The stars were out, the ocean a steady roar below. I told him everything. My fears, my hopes, the truth I'd kept buried for so long. He listened, his hand in mine, and when I finished, he kissed me. It was soft, tentative, then fierce, like he'd been waiting forever. And maybe he had. Maybe we both had. Coming out wasn't easy. Our parents struggled at first, their questions and silences heavy. But they loved us, and in time they understood. The world wasn't always kind. But San Diego became our refuge, a place where we could be ourselves, together. Julian's art flourished, his paintings telling stories of love and resilience. I went back to my research, finding purpose in protecting the ocean, but also in building a life with him. Years later, we stood on that same cliff, older now, but still us. Julian's hand was warm in mine, his smile as bright as ever. "You still trying to avoid me?" he teased, his green eyes sparkling. I laughed, pulling him close. Not a chance. The ocean stretched out before us, endless and alive, and I knew, no matter what came next, we'd face it together. Love isn't perfect. It's messy, complicated, and sometimes terrifying. But it's also the courage to choose someone, to choose yourself, even when the world says you shouldn't. Julian taught me that, and every day I'm grateful I stopped running.